Hi, I'm Ken Rakowski. I have the opportunity to spend time here interviewing some of the movers and shakers. And today we're going to be talking about digital art and where the opportunities are. I am honored to be joined by Vesa, who is a very famous artist who's joining us. Generally you'd be in Finland, but not today, you're here in Abu Dhabi. And do me a favor, can you somehow paint the picture of what your studio looks like in Helsinki?
Well, first of all, the honor is mine, Ken. It's always fun hanging out with you. So, essentially, my work has been digital originals ever since 2008. I started body painting on people, telling their stories, photographing that, painting and photographing the paintings, putting it together with a computer. So I have about 350 originals that are sort of museum-grade artworks, but they're also high-resolution pieces. So what we did with this company called Kolaro in Helsinki is that, hi everyone, by the way. So we we put together this physical space that is about 10 meters in diameter, that is all these works and also the couches and the benches and everything, because they turn into just about anything, because you can print them into a physical space, you can make it into a car like we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and how those physical spaces can transform people's minds into figuring out what's actually important about the metaverse and the digital revolution that we're kind of
but initially that wasn't the purpose of the studio. It was for you to have that collaborative art type of feel, right? You walk in, you get inspired, and you create art.
No. From the get-go, it was the idea is that you walk into this studio that is completely immersive, and then you sit on one of the couches, and you put on VR glasses, and then you kind of dive into the metaverse, and when you come out of it, you're still immersed in art. And then there's also a green screen sort of segment of the studio where some people, when they come in there into this portal, they kind of become art that then become a part of the whole ecosystem. So it's kind of this thing of transporting people from one inspiring setting to the next and kind of like figuring out what that looks like. It's a grand experiment, but it's a lot of fun.
Back in 2006 is really where you started to get attached to digital art.
Yeah, I started as a musician and then a filmmaker. I actually became a educated film director, and I had a production company for a decade almost. And then I had a crisis of everything because I wasn't going into the direction of where I wanted to. I was inspired by David Fincher and Ridley Scott and these directors that generated these whole worlds. But then I found myself in Helsinki with a small production company and having to do a television series about dogs and things like that. And I was like, what the hell is going on with my life? This is not the direction where I want to go. And then this crisis kind of propelled me to innovate. And through that, without having millions of dollars or access to crews of 500, I was able to start generating these worlds, and that's how it came about.
Yeah, we are looking at, actually, this is your artwork. But this is different than painting on canvas, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose. I use canvas, I use paint. It's very, I don't personally get a lot out of purely digital artworks. I mean, some of it is fantastic, but because there's no tangible something in it, I find it that it doesn't touch my heart. It remains quite cerebral. So when I do use paint or people and their stories and their own energy and this kind of, because you could imagine that, let's say body painting is almost like the evolution of oil portraiture in this sense. Like if I was to paint an oil portraiture of you, the job is to capture your sort of essence in a way. But if you do it via body painting and you do it with kind of generating that setting where you are your best self, like Diddy is over there, the Bitcoin family man. We did that as a collaboration in Las Vegas. And then you capture that. I don't have to try and figure your essence. The only thing my job is to allow you to become your best self and then capture that. So it's like an evolution of it. And I think the next evolution of oil portraiture or portraiture painting is actually going to be artificial intelligence. Because I can't scale. I can't make that for everyone, for them to do that kind of a journey. So once the algorithms and this kind of thing becomes possible, then it's not going to be CryptoPunks as your avatars. It's going to be your truest self in a high art setting.
But from your perspective? From your
Not necessarily. I'll be one of the ones who's going to be doing things like what we're doing with Brittany Kaiser now with the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower that we're going to be talking about, and telling her grand story of how it relates to the story of all of us, like the data is the new oil. So her personal story is so incredible, but it's so relevant because it's all of our story. It's how we're giving our data away for free at this moment, and we're not really educated to understand that our data is the most valuable asset in the world. So I'm fascinated by topics like that and how to transform that kind of setting and a premise into something via art that can actually be a part of our everyday lives.
If we go to artists in history, we saw that they use hallucinogenics, and drugs to try to see beyond. You find virtual reality to be your hallucinogenic?
I think at its foundation and why I'm inspired by a lot of spiritual ideas and concepts to begin with is religion, religio. It means to connect. Like the essence of creativity in most of the world's biggest religions is that there's a creation story of some sort. First, the world came about or something like that. So in reality, the world is in constant change and constant inspiration in spirit. It's evolving past us. So the problem that human beings have is that we're feeling like we're disconnected from that world. So whatever it is that you have to do in order to peel back those layers of either trauma or disconnection to your fellow human beings or your surroundings, once you take that out, you're actually immersed in a globe of creativity all the time. So that's the psychedelic trip. Psychedelic means to reveal the soul. So whatever it is that you need to do in order to reveal your soul to yourself, that is the essence of your creativity.
So I'm looking at something behind you. You could tell me what that's called.
Oh, this one. It's called Sacrifice. It's actually, this is lovely because I get to give a shout out to my mom. I made that artwork for her as her 70th birthday, and she was my first sponsor. And of course, helped me along in my very early days of my art career, and still sometimes to different degrees. But this is a special moment because we kind of were able to reconfigure the studio that I have physically in Helsinki to a different kind of setting here. So I was able to embed this into here and give her a shout out. So, love you, Mom.
It looks extremely complex.
Yeah, it's this sort of, how would I say it? Is we all experience different people in different kinds of ways. And then when you make a representation of someone and you make it in an artistic setting like this, of course, most people won't ever recognize of who that's of or any of that kind of thing. But it's, to me, what it represents is all the kinds of things that she sacrificed in her life in order for us to have the kind of life that we were having, and what she did in order for me to be able to become the man that I am, in part.
At what age did you pick up your first paintbrush?
I didn't pay. The first thing that I remember picking up was I turned my parents' pots and pans into a drum kit and spatulas, and I started listening to James Brown and kind of figuring out that there was something about rhythm. And I think the first thing about music is such a profound art form, because you can mix, like for example in movies, you can take a lot of very pixelated images and then great sound, and that can go together. But you can't reverse it. You can't have fantastic cinematic images and then mix it with bad sound. There's something about music that impacts you on a profound level, because the sound resonance actually does something to you vibrationally. So I started with that, and I think with art, with life, with socializing, with everything, there's a rhythm to it. If you understand how that flow works, I think everything else sort of falls nicely on top of it.
I want to go back to the paintbrush. When did you really first pick it up saying,
oh,
I can use this as an instrument?
Well, the first memories that I have of paintbrushes was that I definitely can't use this as an influence, because any kind, because we had this sort of visual classes in school, and most of the time we were using watercolors. And I hated them because they're sort of soggy. You can't really do any definition on them and whatever. I was probably thinking about a drum beat or something. And I remember my teacher coming to me. I was about 11 or something, from above like this, looking at the watercolor that I did, and just said like, well, you obviously don't have any talent in painting whatsoever. And I kind of had to agree with her, because the thing that I was doing was I wasn't paying attention. But then I had that for the longest time in my mind. It was like, I can't paint, I can't paint, I can't paint. And I did everything else. I did photography, film, inside of film. I did directing, producing, editing, video, all of this kind of stuff, even a little bit of acting and whatever, music, multiple instruments and all that kind of stuff. And then I actually saw a guy called Richard Bandler, who's the co-founder of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which derives from hypnosis and kind of making effective change in people's lives. And I saw him on stage where there was a bunch of people who had the same sort of limiting belief as I did, that I can't paint. And then he put them in a trance in this television studio, kind of like a setting like this, and he gave them, I think, acrylics and a canvas. And these people in a trance started painting. And then he sort of walked them up, and then they weren't like Monets or Picassos or anything, but they certainly weren't matching their own internal pictures of themselves as in I can't paint. And at that moment, when I just saw that, I realized that, damn it, that's where it comes from. This is like, I could just get rid of this as a belief. But in technical terms, I could not paint at that point in 2008. So what I realized that what if I started telling people so I could light, I could photograph, I could play with paint, and I could try and figure out with Photoshop how that all would come together. And this is how the process came about. And once I saw the first artwork in front of me, I was like, wow, I don't want to make films anymore. This is absolutely what I want to do from here on out, and I'm still on that journey.
But it sounds like you needed all those creative expressions to understand what it takes to do what you do now.
Yes, absolutely.
It was necessary to fail.
Yeah, and film has been a great sort of embedding of how to get into NFTs from the sort of traditional contemporary mindset, I suppose, and how to make these things move. What are these new metaverses? What are the different kinds of expressions that you can now evolve art with into this exciting new realm where we get to be immersed in art? That's what Picasso wanted to do. Like when he was making Guernica or something, like into a big canvas. That's the dream of an artist, is to bring you into a world, and you can do that to a relative degree with even a small painting if the person is willing to kind of submerge into that. But you can better sort of invite people into a whole world if they just put on virtual reality glasses, or like you build a whole immersive room like this. Then it's a completely different game.
One of my favorite movies is a movie called Midnight in Paris. Not sure if you ever saw it. Owen Wilson goes back to the early 1900s, and he bumps into all these people, and he bumps into Pablo Picasso.
Right.
And Picasso, you see one of his paintings, and he says, yes, you could have it. And it was like for $50 US, right? Crazy. He wants to buy them all. But that's, in Pablo Picasso's mind back then, that was the value of what that painting was.
Yeah.
Now it'd be millions and millions of dollars. So when you look at all of this incredible artwork you put out here, how do you establish a value?
Well, the way I actually got a lot of help with this, because in my early days, in my early 20s of becoming a sort of professional creative, I came across this guy called Ken Wilber. And he's considered the father of integral theory. And basically he's recommended by the level of politics like the Clintons and the Matrix directors and those kinds of people. They come to his Integral Institute in Boulder, Colorado to talk about where their philosophy and their expression and kind of integral priests who are figuring out what's similar between Islam and Christianity or whatever. They go to kind of have at these really important conversations at that institute. And the main curator, art curator, is called Michael Schwartz. He's a professor of history and art. And he basically gave me a quote in 2014 already that my art is among the most integrally advanced in the history of Western abstraction. One bold claim, but one backed up by the words themselves.
Do you want to drop this mic real quick?
It's all right. So, but basically, so he said that I'm already in the same category as the Picassos and the Kahlos and the Rothkos and the whatever. And that means about I suppose even if you look at sort of the legacy price, that's maybe a 5 million floor for a piece. If I have 350 artworks, just quickly counting on the basis of something else, that's about $1.75 billion worth of value.
But as you know, most art becomes popular after the artist dies.
Yeah, but the blockchain kind of solves that, and I've heard enough of people coming to me and saying like, "Oh, Vesa, your works are going to be amazingly expensive after you die." I'm going, well, it's a pretty nasty thing to say to someone, but it's kind of like it's sort of true in the eyes of history. But also, an artist is kind of like a closed circle already. That now in the NFT space, everyone's super enthused about all the Bored Apes and the CryptoPunks and whatever, and it's sort of simple because you know that there's only 10,000 of these. So it's the game reference that they're scarce, there's a community around them, and the expression is kind of easy to understand what it is. So people sort of understood the game reference, but for fine art, it's a little bit of a slower process to come into this whole thing, because you need kind of the tools to analyze what's inside of the frame. Look at the artist's career, what are they sort of doing? But I've generated 350 works in 14 years. So if you think that I'm now 43, I have maybe something like, I don't know, 40, 50 years left if I'm lucky. I live very well. So that means that at that pace of generating works, I'm going to have high resolution, these kinds of images, much more few of them than there are CryptoPunks. So you can close the loop and the circle already before I die to understand how limited, because it's about scarcity.
I get it, but back to the idea, you look at any one of these beautiful pieces of art, in your mind, what do you think the value is?
Well, what is the value of a thing that is new that didn't exist before someone made it?
I understand the philosophy you're going after, but anything that I make, I have to put a value because there has to be some type of market for someone to buy on the other side.
No, so the way that I look at it, this is why it's really difficult to make evaluations like that as an artist, is that
because it's emotional.
No, it's my heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, the times that I couldn't afford food, the times, all the humbling things that I've gone through in order to be here now. So then when you sort of sell it, I understand that there's a market force and something like that. So I go around them because at the same time, it's really up to the world. It's up to me to talk about it and tell what I think is valuable about it. But it's actually the communities that make the market value of it eventually.
But that's where I wanted to go with, because now you're able to give a 3D or whatever D we're looking at, a representation of the story, the emotion in the NFT space. Something you probably could not have done in the traditional space. So you could go much deeper now. You could actually add audio to these.
Yeah.
You can add video. You can do things you couldn't do with traditional art.
No, absolutely. And it's so much about the future of art in the metaverse is like, how do we all become more creative in our lives? How can we get to automate the boring jobs and escape the sort of hellhole of, no, you shouldn't follow your inspiration, you should do something boring because that's how you make money. Because actually it's the other way around. A part of this whole thing is an education for everyone to realize that in the future you won't make money with the boring thing. You can fail at the thing that you don't want to do. So now with these new opportunities and digital economies and everything that is arising, you can really take a shot at the thing that is inspiring and evolve with it, and then find the economy for it, and then try and figure out if you can do a contribution to the world that didn't exist before you were here. So for this reason, I'm not with the Bored Apes Yacht Club, because I'm not bored and I'm not aping into something. I would like to see a world where everyone's unique expression becomes a thing of value, and the economies are generated on that as opposed to mimicking.
How should people describe you when it comes to art? How do you want to be seen?
It's really none of my business how other people see me.
Yeah, but if I go to express Picasso, I would say somebody that's an abstract impressionist who captured the moment in time that he was painting, the people that he saw in their fractal ways. How would I, if you would like to read something of you saying, oh, that is exactly me, what would that be? Because you are very unique, and that's good.
Well, I think it's some of the most successful people on our planet. They kind of realize that they have something and they're a little weird. And as opposed to kind of trying to make themselves like everyone else, they kind of lean into the weirdness. And
Absolutely.
So that's one part that is kind of like Hunter S. Thompson's and the other whatever. If you want to kind of give something to the world that doesn't exist, then you have to discover the reveal the soul. So I think I've done that to a degree, and then I'm on this continuous journey of discovery. But where it comes all together is back to Ken Wilber, the integral art theory. It's like integral art really just means to be able to look at multiple things at once and see how they make a comprehensive whole.
By the way, I've interviewed 25,000 people, okay? And one of the, I would say of all these people, there were certain traits that were the same amongst the extremely highly successful people, okay? And one of those traits was all of them saw themselves as uncommon. Uncommon, which would be your weird thing, you know? But yeah, Elon Musk actually sat back and he says, I'm uncommon, which means is I don't accept commonality. Common does not work for me. Uncommon does, and that's exactly you. So why are you excited about NFTs? Why do you see this as the future?
Well, one of the things that I suppose we're in kind of as a part of this, I've been building this world with Superworld, which is an augmented reality platform. It's really exciting. It's like they made 62 billion plots of land out of Google Earth, essentially. So I own the Louvre of Abu Dhabi, actually, in the Superworld. I bought it for $80, which is a little bit cheaper than what they paid for it. But so I can build something inside of the Louvre of Abu Dhabi in this virtual reality setting, an augmented reality thing. And it's one thing, but with their team, we've been building a spearhead gallery that is inspired by the Luxor temple, which is the temple in man. It's been built into the image of man, and it actually tells the story of how a pharaoh goes from birth to transcendence, and how that artistic temple in and of itself helps societies keep together and tells the story of how to live well. And that was such it just blew my mind that you could build a building that is a life lesson.
And like you placed it inside the NFT space.
Yeah, we built this into 3D with the honor and respect of John Anthony West. Through him, I learned what the temple was, and then kind of deepened into that a little bit, and then honoring that sort of presence and what they achieved already in the ancients. We were able to put together the past, present, and future of art and expression, of what art really supports. It should be a slice of life. What I find quite annoying about the sort of postmodern era of art, the last 50 years of it, is that it's become almost synonymous in many people's minds of the banana that was on the wall of that Miami gallery 2019, and kind of this insult kind of thing that doesn't make sense and miasmic and whatever. And I'm trying to a little bit return some of the functionality of art. This is what I started with. How is art truly relevant to our lives, even if you're not an educated professional and you don't want to be there with a glass of red wine and pretending something is cool or what. So how does that, one of the main problems that I saw that artists were doing is that they kind of went to art school and then they learned everything about Picasso and Monet and going all the way back to Da Vinci and whatever. So, and they were referencing, almost making footnotes of art throughout, and then their professors would grade them well if they've put enough footnotes into their sort of thing. And their art was very insular in its education a while ago, and that's why it all looked the same and felt the same, because the institution itself kind of funneled people to be the same. Now, what I realized with Ken very early on is that I could go into, let's say, a scientific field and take something like what Elon Musk is doing with a car and find an artistic expression of the whole philosophy of what he's put together. And then I'm contributing actually into a whole ecosystem that is already being sort of going into one way.
Which we haven't even touched upon. You're doing these wraps around cars and turning cars into driving artworks, which is amazing. One of them is seen here. Hey, I want to jump to something totally different. When I say the name Brittany Kaiser, what do you think of?
I'm thinking one of the most relevant stories of our time. I'm thinking about data ownership, and so the story of Brittany Kaiser really is that she was working with a company. Well, she started as an idealist, sort of leftist political campaigner, wanted to make the world a better place, and then she ends up in a right-wing think tank at a startup that is then famously became synonymous with the Trump campaign and Brexit and all this kind of massive things, and eventually pointing to what Facebook was doing with its data, and about, I think it was 400 companies who were doing the same as Cambridge. So it wasn't just Cambridge, it was a much, much wider problem. And eventually, when she came out with her story, I think Facebook lost $120 billion in market value. And they were writing about 35,000 articles of her a day, and now there's about 5 million articles of her life and sort of everything that she revealed in relation to something that I think is so super important for all of us, for us to realize how valuable our data is and demand decentralized solutions or these companies to kind of start respecting the value that we're giving to them. Because the first 20 years of media, social media companies, is really all of us just giving out our value for free.
And you're working with her, right?
Yeah, we did this whole thing in my studio in Helsinki. We were using 8 GoPro cameras, depth cameras. There's this wonderful 3D artist called Frank Spalteholz who flew from Germany to do this, and Zoan, the virtual reality company, and a bunch of... We're just trying to figure out, we don't really yet even know how all of it is coming together. It's an evolution, but it's essentially her life story and the bigger story of data coming together in an NFT artwork, and some of it, I can't wait to see what the virtual reality versions of that are going to be. It's going to be incredible.
Now, Brittany couldn't join us here, but she has created a message for the audience, and we're going to embed that video so people can see it. So here's Brittany Kaiser.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Kaiser, and I'm a data rights activist, someone that has spent so many years of my life working on our digital rights and digital ownership, what it actually means to own digital content, where we have transparency and consent and permissions, and the ability to always retain a certain amount of value in royalties or in any sort of ownership rights. And that is one of the most important concepts that came out of blockchain technology this year. NFT, who knew that that would be one of the world's top buzzwords, the Collier's Dictionary Word of the Year, even one of the topics at Saturday Night Live. I think a lot of us in the blockchain technology, cryptography communities, anyone that originally followed the cypherpunks up until some of the top NFT traders now, what we all know is that encryption is freedom. Our ability to use code to control, own, transfer, and value our digital assets is one of the most important innovations that has now become popularized in 2021. Why am I one of the people to be talking to you about this? Well, I spent a lot of my life working in technology, but I've seen the best sides of technology and the worst. In 2018, I became a whistleblower, not just on the data industry, but the way in which technology worked in general. I had spent a lot of my life working with what are inherently extractive technologies. Technology companies and platforms and products that are made to take as much value away from us as possible. Yet with the move to Web 3.0, what we are now able to do is, instead of working for technology, technology is able to work for us, where we can use encryption, smart contracting, and other forms of blockchain technology in order to own and control our digital content, our data, our value, as opposed to it essentially just being taken away from us the moment that we touch technology. And I think you've probably heard this from many more people than just me, but data in 2017 apparently became the world's most valuable asset, more valuable than oil and gas. Now, this multi-trillion-dollar industry has many big corporations at the top of it. Why do you think that companies like Google and Facebook and Apple, Uber even, have become some of the most valuable companies in the world? It's the value of the digital assets that they have collected, a lot of that being personal data from all of us as users. So our data makes the most powerful companies in the world to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars and trillions of dollars that they are worth. It is really an accumulation of our value. And that is what Web 3.0 returns back to us, the value that we have created in the technology supply chain, back to the individual. This is why I actually left Cambridge Analytica, was to go full time into blockchain technology, to work with technologists that actually cared about ethical and moral principles, to work with technologists that care about transparency and consent and permission, to work with technologists that cared about empowering people. Now, over the past year and a half, what we have seen with the coronavirus shutdown is that we have all been forced to lead nearly a completely digital life. And now, for the first time, we have seen this kind of global awakening of people that never seem to understand the importance of your digital life or your value in the digital world until we were all thrust into this digital life without particularly choosing it. Or even our children are leading a digital life to just go to school or interact with their friends. And so I think as a global society, we have started to revalue what digital content and value and time and attention actually means. Because when we haven't had very much face-to-face time, we haven't had very much interaction in our analog world, then of course everything that we do digitally is consistently quantified as our ones and zeros, our value, our data that we are producing. And so we've seen this incredible spur of mass adoption for blockchain technologies, for smart contracting, for bringing back that power and choice, and of course, value back into our daily digital lives. And that is why I could not be more honored to not just be speaking with you here today. Our digital lives allow me to be with you in Abu Dhabi while also being in Austin, Texas. Thank you to the metaverse for making that happen. But what it also allows us to do is to start to educate and bring awareness of what digital rights and data rights actually mean. What does it mean for us to own our value and our content? To be able to choose our privacy and anonymity, or to be able to own our entire value supply chain that we create in our digital lives. Well, I was lucky enough to be introduced to the incredible artist Vesa last summer. And that's when we started talking about doing an incredibly important, not just NFT project, but a project that would be able to bring that passion, that engagement, that emotional side to what it means to own your data, what it means to be able to own your digital content, to use a smart contract encryption and blockchain technology to protect yourself and your family, but also lead a successful digital life. And so what we have been working on, and what I just had the honor to spend so much time in Finland working with him and the team on, is going to blow your minds when you see it. It's only the very beginning of our production, but we have started to put together what will be a traveling exhibit of NFTs, physical and digital art, AR, VR experiences that can go from art gallery to museum to technology, legal, or government conference, explaining in a beautiful, creative, and emotional way the importance of these technologies to society, to our future. So thank you all for giving me the time to speak with you today. I'm so excited for you to hear more from Vesa about what we have in store for you. And thank you so much for caring about the types of technologies that I believe are going to change our world for the better. I'll end with my favorite quote from the late, great Dr. Stephen Hawking, who said that technology will allow us to live in luxurious leisure. What he meant by that was that the move from legacy technologies that take advantage of us, whereas I said before, where we are working for technology platforms, that instead we should be building technology that allows us to live a better life, that empowers us. And so, yes, technology can work for us, and it takes all of us in this room working together to make sure that that future becomes a reality. So thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, Vesa, for being there in person with everyone. And I am so excited to see you all in person in Abu Dhabi sometime soon. Thank you, everyone.
Vesa, I really appreciate you spending time with us. If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Artforcrypto.com, and on Twitter and Instagram, it's @artbyvesa, V-E-S-A.
And Vesa from Helsinki, and if I say it right, I believe it's Kiitos, which means thank you. In Finnish, kiitos for being with us.
Kiitos, Ken.